It is so great to have everybody here in the last month of the year. Can you believe we're about ready to say hello to 2025? All right, well, good afternoon, everyone. My name is John Christensen. I'm the board president of the Orange County Forum, and I want to welcome you all to our final critical conversation for 2024. And wow, what a way to end the year. Today's program is entitled 2024 Post-Election Insights, Now What? We're very fortunate to have two of the foremost political commentators in the region with us, and they will provide insights and analysis that you can't get anywhere else. But first, I want to take a moment and acknowledge our wonderful partners who make these events possible, beginning with our title sponsor for the fourth consecutive year, our friends here at Table 3. Let's give a huge thank you to UCI and UCI Health. On the screens, you'll see all of the ongoing OC Forum sponsors, and we want to thank all of them for their generous support and commitment, which are what make these great programs like today possible. The Orange County Forum Board of Directors is full of very talented people who are very dedicated to ensuring that we remain the top provider of nonpartisan public affairs programming in the region. They give their time, their expertise, and their passion to support our mission. And at this time, I'd like all of my fellow board members to please stand and be recognized. Come on, Mike Ruane. All right, thank you for that. You know, I know we have some elected officials and their representatives that have been kind enough to take time out of their busy schedules, especially in this busy month, and join us today. So I'm going to ask all of you to please stand and be recognized. All of our elected officials here. All right. Thank you. There you go. And finally, of course, I would be remiss if I didn't take a moment and thank each of you for being here today and for your terrific support of the forum throughout the year. Your engagement and dedication are what have made our impactful discussions so meaningful and successful, and we truly appreciate your attendance. Well, now let's get on with the show. It is my high pleasure to introduce today's moderator, a highly respected leader in our community with extensive experience in public policy and a deep commitment to advocacy. She serves as the Vice President of Chief Advocacy and Public Policy Officer at Children's Hospital of Orange County and is on the boards of the Orange County Business Council, Santa Ana Chamber of Commerce, of course the OC Forum, and Santa Ana College Foundation. She's also a member of the Provider Advisory Committee for CalOptima Health, Orange County's county organized health system, and serves as Orange County's Mental Health Services Act Steering Committee. Her expertise, her leadership, and dedication to creating meaningful change make her the perfect person to guide us through today's critical conversation. And besides all of that, she's one of the nicest and smartest people I know that reside in our county. Please join me in giving a warm Orange County Forum welcome to Jena Jensen.
Yeah, that was awfully nice what John said. Some of you know me, so you know that's not all true, but it was nice anyway. Okay, thanks for coming today. Really happy to see so many friends here. So this is a really special event. I'm really excited that we get to do this today. As John said, I'm Jena Jensen. I have the privilege of serving as Chief Advocacy and Public Policy Officer at CHOC. I've been there almost 32 years. And on the board of the OC Forum. I think this organization is so important because it pulls us together for these kinds of conversations that we probably don't have anywhere else. So let's get to what's going to happen today. We have two distinguished voices who bring decades of experience and insight into the political arena. First, we have Richie Ross, a seasoned California political strategist whose career spans advising candidates, campaigns, and causes across our state. Richie has a unique ability to navigate the ever-changing dynamics of California politics, making him an invaluable voice in today's conversation. And next, we are honored to welcome Mike Madrid, another powerhouse in political strategy and the author of the highly anticipated book, The Latino Century: How America's Largest Minority is Transforming Democracy. And you're all going to get a copy of that book today if you haven't already. It's a really, really good book. I think you're going to enjoy it. And Mike will be signing books at the end. We'll talk about that later. Mike has dedicated his career to analyzing and addressing the complexities of electoral politics with a particular focus on the Latino electorate and its growing influence. Thank you both for taking the time to share your expertise and perspectives with us. We are so fortunate to have you here. So before we begin, I want to remind everyone that this is a conversation. Richie and Mike will share their perspectives, and we encourage you to engage as well. So please, as they're talking, if you think about questions, maybe jot them down so you'll be ready at the end to share your questions with us so we can keep the conversation going and sort of focus it on things that you'd like to talk about. All right, so I think we're going to go ahead and get started and bring Richie and Mike up here and start this conversation. Thank you again. Okay, you'll take that one? You're deaf.
I'm deaf at one here.
Old. Okay. That. Maybe back a little bit. Are these turned on? Can you hear this? Good? Okay. All right, so this is going to be a little different. I imagine you've all heard plenty of postmortems on the recent election. What does it mean from a policy standpoint? Why did what happen, all that kind of stuff. I wanted to have more of a conversation about kind of where are we now from a political standpoint, and sort of what the philosophical and sociological underpinnings are of where we find ourselves today. So I think that's kind of how we'd like to steer the conversation, especially with these two people here. Because the other commentary you can get from TV, from the radio, from wherever else you consume your media. But this conversation we can only have here today. So that's what we're going to do. But if you have questions, again, that you'd like us to ask at the end, please let me know. So I'm going to start right in with a question that we talked about starting with when we did a prep call, which is, Richie, you described yourself and Mike as people who have been disloyal to your parties. And if you don't know Richie and Mike, they've both been mavericks in their party and not always done exactly what folks expected them to do, which is what I like about both of them. And Mike, in your book, you say, actually verbatim, I always had a knack for being a pain in the ass when I wanted to be. In Spanish, we call that being a cabrón, right? I think of the two of you as mavericks and truth tellers, which is why we wanted you here today. So I think we'd like to hear from both of you, one at a time. If we look at the two parties, the Republicans and the Democrats, what do you think they're getting right, and what do you think they're getting wrong right now?
You're looking at me, so I'll start with that.
I'll start with you.
Well, let me first say that there's always a tendency after elections for people who are the winners or perceived as the winners to sort of say, see, we vanquished the other side, our ideas are correct, there's a mandate to govern. The voters have asked us to kind of take the mantle and start implementing this new vision. That is very, very rarely ever true. I think there's probably been a few cycles in my time doing this where that I think was clearly the case. This was not one of those instances. This was a remarkably close election in a lot of ways. And the only thing I think that made this one different from the past few of them was that the changing nature of the parties' coalitions are becoming very, very clear. They've been coming into focus for the past few election cycles. Now it's really clear what's happening, right? If you had told me ever at any time in my time doing campaigns that 20 days before the election, Donald Trump would be on Univision, and, well, ever Donald Trump being on Univision would ever be a thing, but that, Kamala Harris, or the Democratic nominee, would be on Fox News, maybe in the late spring of a campaign year, but not 20 days before. And those are signs that both campaigns, I think, are really trying to figure out how much range they have beyond their traditional base. Because everything that we've known about the coalitions in both parties is changing as we are going through this era of profound transformation. So it's easy to say the Republicans got it right, in the same way that it would have been able to say that in 2022 for the Democrats, or arguably even in 2020. But one of the things that I'm looking at, and it's particularly pronounced in counties like Orange County, is there's an increased number of ticket splitters that are voting consciously against how they're voting at the top of the ticket. And that behavior over a period of time, most pronounced really in the Trump era, is telling us that people don't have a lot of confidence in either party. And what they're doing is they're voting consciously for divided government. They're voting to as a check against the person at the top of the ticket that they're voting for. And this is the second election cycle in a row where we saw something that we aren't used to seeing, which is the party that loses the White House picks up seats in the House. That happened here by one seat with the Democrats, but it happened with the Republicans when Donald Trump lost in 2020. The Republicans picked up seats. Very anomalous behavior. Things that we haven't seen in many, many decades are now starting to become more typical.
The yin and yang in politics is recency and permanency. And the flaw in much of the political punditry that we all get overexposed to is that they're all suckers for recency bias. And people tend to ignore permanency. Now, I don't believe those are conflicting realities in politics. I believe they are complementary. I believe that everybody analyzing the results of the race for president have been looking in the wrong place. They're all analyzing the specifics of each of those campaigns. That's recency bias at its worst. If you go back to 1952, Harry Truman was unpopular, didn't run for re-election, and the out party, the Republican Party at the time, won the presidency. 1968, Lyndon Johnson was unpopular, didn't run for re-election. His vice president got beat by Richard Nixon. Richard Nixon was unpopular, and his vice president, Gerald Ford, got beat by Jimmy Carter. You can trace that pattern, that DNA of American politics, at least back to 1952. Now, based on my own age, I can't go further back than that. But I find it intriguing that people who want to understand what happened now have never mentioned that, and therefore have never looked at why was Joe Biden, what were the roots of his unpopularity? Because if, in fact, the unpopular nature of the president or the president's party results in the out party winning the presidency, and that has been an uninterrupted pattern for 75 years. Uninterrupted, no exceptions. That's fascinating to me. And nobody is looking at the roots of President Biden's unpopularity to understand why, therefore, Vice President Harris had no chance of winning, despite what everybody wants to talk about. You know, Mike and I share something, which is, in politics, there's a whole industry of second guessers. And they get paid a lot of money to second guess. And they opine. Well, Charles Barkley, do you know who Charles Barkley is? Basketball player, TNT. So there was a fellow named John Gruden who was the coach of the Oakland Raiders. He left coach, he went to Tampa Bay. I think he got the Buccaneers their first Super Bowl championship, then quit coaching and went into broadcasting and worked his way up to the #1 job in sports broadcasting. He was the lead guy on Monday Night Football. Before we had Thursday night, Sunday night, we had Monday Night Football. He was the lead guy. He quit the job, he had a $10 million job, to go back and try to coach the Oakland Raiders again. And Charles Barkley said, "What a fool. That's the dumbest damn thing. We have the easiest job in the world. They pay us money to second guess. Why would you give up being a second guesser to go back and become a first guesser?" Mike and I, our history, different as it is, have spent our careers trying to be first guessers, and it's hard.
So back to Orange County, because this is an Orange County crowd, right? Everybody likes to talk about themselves. So listen, we heard you say something about Orange County. Now we want to hear more about Orange County. And Rachel and I were just talking about this the other day, that looking at the election outcome, it has to be true that people were splitting the ballot. It has to be true that people were going through race by race and not voting one way or the other. They were picking and choosing. But Orange County has changed so much. I've been here like 38 years now. And every time I try to think that I know who we are, I'm wrong. But I'd be interested to know, who do you think we are? Like, if you were on an airplane with someone who'd never been here and they were about to land here and they said, "Hey, by the way, what are the politics like around here?" I know what I would have said 30 years ago, but what would you say now?
You're not that different. I mean, everybody thinks they're, every generation has a new goat, greatest of all time.
Are you saying we're not special?
I'm saying you're not special. I'm saying you're not that. This is an Orange County crowd, but I'm leaving Orange County, going home. So I really don't care. I have no invested. Mike's staying. He's signing books.
We'll hear from Mike next.
Yeah.
I think Orange County's very special.
There you go, Mike. But certain things are immutable. Bernie Sanders is still waiting for the young people to elect him president. Young people, I knew that was a joke. Young people don't wash their clothes till they run out of underwear. That's never going to change. There are certain patterns of human behavior that don't change. Orange County's change is its population makeup. It's different people. So, is Orange County different than it used to be? Yeah, as is Glendale, or as is Imperial County. Every place changes as the nature of the population changes. But a few things remain the same. And I think that applies to Orange County. I agree with you. What happened in Orange County was people were making very deliberate choices. Okay, that speaks well, I think, of the population. I also think it's exactly what other people did all over the state of California.
Now we're back to not being special again. So we're going to ask Mike. Why are we special, Mike?
Orange County is a place that I, for most of my career, methodically, consciously, deliberately avoided. And the reason why is, as a Republican who was not from here, the type of politics in Republican politics specifically, when this was a county of largely or almost exclusively Republican politics, tells you how old I am, by the way, was just blood sport. It was just personalities. It wasn't an ideological difference, and if you just kind of looked the wrong way, that meant you weren't a real Republican, so let's go get that person and destroy their career. That's obviously foundationally changed. So much so that when I was asked by UC Irvine to be a senior fellow at the school to kind of help assess some of these changes, and I immediately said, I want to be a part of that. So let me walk through some of the unique things, the nerdy things I look at when I try to say you are special. Orange County. You are special. The first is you have a higher number of non-white college graduates than any metropolitan area in the country. And the reason why that nerdy little data point is so interesting to me is because it portends a change in voting behavior that is defining our era, our age. Age not meaning chronological age, but this time period. The diploma divide is the single largest demarcation of politicization that we can identify at this point of great transformation right now. If you have a college degree, you are much more likely to vote for the Democratic Party than at any time since we started tracking these things back in the late 30s, early 40s, when Gallup started doing deep research on this. If you don't have a college degree, it's far more likely that you are moving towards the Republican Party. And as we move towards this political era that is defined by culture and education, the old era, which was defined largely by race and ethnicity, where Orange County has a deep, deep, deep history of those two, are colliding at precisely the right moment, at precisely the right place, with precisely the right unique characteristics to make this one of the most fascinating places in the country to study politics. Let me give you some examples. Santana in the house. There you go. Santana has one of the longest, deepest histories for a large city of Mexican American and Latino ancestry. Right next door, Westminster in the house. Oh, look at that. All right. Good for you. Round of applause for Westminster representing. The diaspora of the Vietnamese who came here in the 1970s congealed what was very unique at the time, which was a partisan ethnic bloc as a Republican. There have only been 3 discernible groups that have ever come to the shores of the United States as emigres in large enough numbers to be identified as Republican. The Cubans, the Vietnamese, and now the Venezuelans were starting to see it. Every other group that has come for economic reasons began with the Democratic Party and the machinery that they have always built. So a funny thing is happening between these two Orange County cities. As we're seeing later and later generational growth, the more US born they are, the more they are walking away not just from their Latinidad or the Vietnamese ethnic anchor and becoming, quote, more and more American, they're leaving their partisan anchor behind too. So you hear a lot of lamentation amongst Democratic Latinos in Santana saying, our kids and our grandkids are becoming more Republican. They're becoming more Trumpy. What's going on? And then you go next door and you hear the Vietnamese saying, our kids are starting to vote more and more for the Democrats. I've got a grandchild who's voting for Kamala Harris. Can you believe it? Right? And to me, that's a fascinating place to look at this intersection between the way race and ethnicity is changing. Because the racial construct of what we have viewed as a minority is completely different now. Write that down. Because for the past 30 years, California has been largely defined by the racial and ethnic identity and the construct of these voters that are essentially non-white. This election, and again, this isn't the first time it happened. This trend has been going on for the better part of a decade. But this trend away from these typical ethnic-linked partisan voting behaviors is most pronounced here in Orange County. And I'll end it on this. Sorry about the academic exercise here. In 2016, we noticed something very unique in Orange County. In fact, it was so unique we didn't have a name for it. We know what an undervote is, which is people will show up, especially people that don't show up regularly on elections, and they want to go vote at the top of the ticket, and they vote for the Republican, or they vote for the Democrat, and then it gets down to this list of, dog catcher and water board and judges, and then, city council. No, I was kidding, city councilman. Just kidding. Sign my book, I'll be waiting for you outside. But what we call that then undervote is those voters would drop off. They just get tired. They're like, I want to go vote for Reagan. I want to go vote for Bill Clinton. I want to go vote for whoever. And I don't know who these other people are, so they just leave it blank. In 2016, the exact opposite happened in Orange County. Republican precincts were not voting for Donald Trump at the top of the ticket, but the House seats were much stronger. There were more voters in the House than there were for the Republican nominee in 2016. In 2018, all of those precincts vote overwhelmingly Democratic, and for the first time in this county's 50-year history anyway, not ever, but a long time, there's no Republican member of Congress representing the county. Remember that? Then in 2020, something even stranger happens. Joe Biden carries the county, but the Republicans pick up a couple of House seats. None of these things are traditional in any sense. We don't see this anywhere else. And then again, the behavior that you were just looking at in the 2024 elections. All of this is pointing, especially in those districts with the highest number of college graduates, a very informed, methodical voting behavior that is challenging the ideologies of both parties. And where it gets really extra nerdy for somebody like me is when you overlay that with non-white college-educated voters, you get a really cool petri dish of whether ethnicity or class or education levels are challenging our partisan assumptions. And in Orange County, that is happening every election cycle depending on which community you're in and which candidates are running. And to me, that's very special, Orange County.
Is that right? Okay, so we're fascinating. That's what I picked up from this. We're fascinating. But I think, too, what I like about us as voters is that I think, maybe the reason we fall off at the end is that we want to vote for people we know something about. And, it takes a lot of time and energy to learn about every single candidate. So maybe people are voting for the candidates they've had a chance to get to know. And that means we're well-informed, thoughtful voters, and we're fascinating. So I like that about us. What about the state?
I feel like the bad clown at the birthday party.
I have a real problem with clowns, and most people who know me know that. So I never would think of you that way, ever. You're not the bad clown at the birthday party. But speaking of clowns, this is not a good way to lead into this question at all. I apologize in advance for that. But I do want to talk about the state of California, because we talked about Orange County. We do live in the state of California, and I think the state of California, let's talk about the legislature, and let's talk about the governor's race coming up in California, and let's talk about where our Democrats in California find themselves. I'm also interested in kind of where labor positions itself. I'm interested in the gubernatorial race, and I'm also interested in why we have tech leaders from the Silicon Valley, which is where I grew up. So this is, where I was born, where I grew up, then I moved down here. How do we end up with these people in the Trump transition team with so much power? I just never thought I would have seen that, and I don't know. But you're going to tell me it's just about the money, Jena, and you're an idiot. So go ahead. So you can.
No, it's just about the money. You're not an idiot.
You can start with that.
No, look, what's happened to the Democrats in California is, remember the AM, PM, Mini Mart ads, too much good stuff? That's what's happened to the Democrats. Microsoft has been around 50 years. People forget, 15, 20 years ago, it was fading, failing, becoming irrelevant. Microsoft becoming irrelevant. Its first CEO, obviously, was Bill Gates. He passed it along to Steve Ballmer. At that point, after Ballmer left, that company was heading downhill very quickly. A guy who had been a lifer there, named Satya Nadella, applied to the board of directors to be the new CEO. He summed up his candidacy in one very simple and powerful phrase: I will change the culture of Microsoft from know-it-all to learn it all. That's what's happened to the Democrats. They are know-it-all. They are so sure that they began to take and have taken for granted their own roots. During the pandemic, you didn't hear one politician, Democratic politician, not one, ever give a speech, ever make a commercial, ever write a political brochure that did not include the words essential workers. Oh, yeah? That's just some non-white guy who cuts your grass. That's what that is. And they just, we got to protect the essential workers. Yeah, because who else is going to clean the bedpan in the hospital bed? An essential worker. Since the pandemic, You have not heard one Democratic politician use the term essential worker because they're not needed anymore. In fact, the Democrats routinely call them non-college educated. Now, what group of human beings have you ever heard defined with the first word of the description being in the negative? Non-college education says lesser. Oh, okay. Well, now all the lesser people just kicked your ass, and they're leaving because they ain't lesser, and they ain't letting you get away with that. All the climate change crap that everyone's in. I'm against climate. I get all of that. But you know what? Every single climate change policy, every single one of them that would affect me and any of you won't take effect till 2035. Oh, how courageous of we're the leaders. Really? Yeah, you don't. Except, guess what? You know what's been banned now? Leaf blowers and chainsaws. And now they're wondering why they're losing blue-collar men. Because blue-collar men use leaf blowers and chainsaws. Skinny guys riding bicycles with messenger bags don't use. I mean, the Democrats forgot and have abandoned people who use laundromats in favor of people who use yoga mats. That's their problem. The Democratic Party has become so unconsciously elitist. You know, all the isms, racism, sexism, ageism, all of the isms are their most destructive when the person engaging in those behaviors is unaware that they are acting in a racist, misogynist, sexist, ageist, elitist manner. That's where the destruction is with the isms. And that is why the Democrats, if you think about what I just said and you analyze Governor Newsom's behavior, or you listen to legislators, they're so out of it. It's appalling. It's appalling. They don't even see the people that they're talking about. They don't know any of them. Don't know any of them. Don't hang out. Don't hear. They all hire comms people, communications people, to do what? Oh, express their point of view. They don't hire anybody to listen. And if you don't listen, you're not winning in this business.
So I've heard this before. I've heard Richie talk about this before, and I wanted him to come and talk about this today. Are they listening to you?
They're listening.
Okay.
They're listening. They're a little annoyed, but they're getting it. They're warming. They're warming.
I think that's what you always say when someone asks you if people are listening. Well, they're a little annoyed, but good. Okay, so they're listening. Mike, do you have something you want to say about this?
Besides the fact that I'll be signing people up for Richie Ross for governor in 2026 outside later on. Look, that's exactly right. Let me put this as. Let me back up a little bit. When I kind of first told my party, the GOP, to kind of take a hike, I got a call from a guy who was the former mayor of Los Angeles, Antonio Villaraigosa. This is 2018. And he says, Mike, I'm thinking about running for governor. And I said, okay, why are you calling me? You know, and he said, I want you to be involved. I want you to help guide this thing. And I was like, I'm a Republican. And he said, yeah, I think that's kind of what's wrong with the state. And I said, well, why do you want to be governor? And he said, because we are, my party and this state is losing blue-collar, working-class people, and I want to fight for them. And I said, do you really think that message is going to work in your party? And he said, yeah, this is what I do. This is what I've done.
He didn't become governor, did he?
I didn't ruin Richie's story, right? The funny thing is, Antonio and I went to go sit down with Richie to tell him this idea, and he sat there, leaned back, was looking at me like, kid, you're about to get your ass kicked in this thing. You have no idea what you're about to do. And the irony is, after the 2024 elections, which Antonio, of course, is running for governor again, I'm not involved in it at all, but what the whole Democratic Party's lesson, whether or not they get it, has realized that that is precisely what they needed to do to fix the problem. That doesn't mean they will. In fact, I'm a Republican. For 30 years, I've been telling them what to do to fix their Latino problem, and for 30 years, they would summarily dismiss and ignore all of the evidence before them. Basic common sense stuff. So it's not endemic to one party. The challenge of this moment is really going to be, as the coalitions change, union membership is changing, working class membership is changing, Latinos, African Americans, whites are changing. All of this stuff is in incredible flux at the moment, and the Democrats have this 16, I think it's like 16 people running for Congress or for governor at this moment. They're all basic small sliver gradations of each other, right? You got, I think, half of them are women, which is fantastic, but they're like, well, but this one's an Asian woman, this is a Greek woman, this is a white woman, this is an LGBTQ woman. This one, you know, and you're like, how big of a lane do you think there is for that audience going, I really want a San Diego LGBTQ woman with 30 years of experience compared to this other woman that I'm looking for? In that environment, you are missing the big through line of what is happening. And that's the problem, is the Democrats have 16 candidates with nobody understanding the basic through line. That's why they lost. One of the fascinating things was I was getting calls from reporters regularly during this last election cycle saying, you would not believe the sophistication of the micro-targeting and online analytic work that the Harris campaign is doing with Latinos. They can talk to first-generation Guatemalan residents of Houston who have just recently naturalized. And I was like, now I know they're going to lose. That was when I knew. This is going to be a bigger wave. It's going to be a bigger wave than I wrote my book about. Because it's coming, and it's because they're looking for so much specificity that they're missing the obvious basic through line, which is these are blue-collar workers who can't pay the rent very well, and you keep increasing prices, and you're making housing unaffordable. It's as simple as that. It's as simple as that. So that, I think, and it's fascinating that we're having this conversation in a state that at this moment remains a two-thirds majority Democratic state. Mm-hmm. But those numbers have been narrowing. And I recall being probably in the same hotel 30 years ago in 1994 when Republicans were rejoicing, saying, we're going to take over California permanently. And I was cautioning them, look at the underlying data here, as Richie was saying. Look at the tectonic shifts. You won one election cycle, recency versus permanency. We're on the cusp of something very, very significant that is probably generational. That is indeed what happened. The reason why I wrote my book is because we are on the verge of something generational, which is already happening. This was the first time that we saw it in this election cycle.
So you've been, I just have a follow-up question.
Go ahead.
For both of you.
Yeah.
So I've known you for a while, and y'all both been telling people this for a while. Why is no one listening?
I think because both of us, and I think I can speak for Mike as well as myself, we both are really not likable people.
That's true. That's true.
I mean, who the hell wants to pay you to say this shit?
You make an excellent
Nobody.
point. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Look at, I said people were forgetting to look at the roots of President Biden's lack of popularity. Now let's take everything that Mike just said and ask ourselves this. What's the root of it? What was the mistake? To me, I remember when they kept saying, President Biden kept saying, everything he was doing, he used the word trillion. And that's an odd, I never heard people brag about trillion. Trillion was a problem. Trillion? He actually rebranded all of his policies around the word trillion, then called that Bidenomics. Then couldn't get Build Back Better passed, infrastructure, made a deal with Manchin to create an infrastructure package, and then the ultimate insult to the working class. They called it the Inflation Reduction Act. It had nothing. It reduced the price of diabetes drugs. That was it. It didn't do any. You look at the money, none of it went for fighting inflation. People knew that the price of bacon was $9. I remember doing focus groups, Mike, and this lady just summed it all up. We're working her, trying to see how to move people. And she says, yeah, but my rent wasn't as high when Trump was president. I knew when I heard that last March, it's game over. My rent wasn't as high when Trump was president. I said, oh, we're done. Because everybody in the room nodded their head. And I said, oh, people are not stupid. They are not stupid. I have enjoyed a long career in this business because I always believe the voters are right. Even when I disagree with them, they're right. The law of large numbers actually works. Yeah. And when Mike was kind of making fun of all this micro-targeting, whatever's hip and new, he's absolutely correct. They forgot the narrative, the overarching narratives that govern how we behave politically.
Well, and there's something to the fact that people don't want to change, right? So they're not listening because change is really uncomfortable. I mean, you talk about that in your book, Mike.
Yeah, well, everyone's convinced they're right in this time period, right? That's why confirmation bias is such a big problem. I was going back and forth with some reporter today saying, oh, these Latino rightward shifts are happening because there's a bunch of news deserts that are out there. And I'm like, how the hell is there a news desert in the age of the digital age when everybody's on their phone reading the same content you want to read? Like, you're talking about the demise of local newspapers, which is, frankly, a condescending way of saying Latinos aren't smart enough or informed enough to know how they voted. Like, that's a very pervasive sentiment. This is good. Here's a story. Yeah. As a young Republican political consultant, I heard all the time, these Latinos don't know how they're voting. They don't know what's good for them. They just listen to these other news sources. They're listening to labor organizations and these activists who aren't telling them the truth. And I'd be like, you think like hundreds of thousands of people are somehow susceptible to this? Yeah, they're voting against their own interests. Now I hear that from the left. The exact same message. This condescending sense of they don't know what they're voting on. They're not smart enough. There was disinformation on Spanish language WhatsApp chats, chat, whatever they are, right? Like, there's this need to somehow find some explanation as to why I can't be wrong because my worldview is clearly right. And I'm reading so much stuff that my algorithm has fed me to tell me that I'm right, but I'm not able to see the world any way differently, which is why when your candidate doesn't win, it feels like a cataclysmic event. The apocalypse is upon us. The world is about to end. None of that is true, okay? It doesn't mean that we aren't on the cusp of extraordinary change, and I'll end with this. Kamala Harris's slogan was, we're not going back. Newsflash, we weren't going back if she won. We are barreling down the pathway of a time when the institutions that we have created, particularly government, no longer are meeting the needs of the citizenry or the consumer base. Government was the last institution to have this hit. That's what the Trump era has told us. What we have always done does not work. And I'm not suggesting that the solutions that were being proposed or the nominees that are being suggested to be put in place to oversee these institutions are good. But what I am telling you is if the idea was that we could just continue doing what we were doing or go back to a pre-2016 era, that is completely misguided. We have to transform and change these institutions. One of the crazy ironies, and I say this as a consultant who made plenty of money doing this, California's obsession with reform over the past 25 and 30 years are the biggest red flag that this stuff hasn't been working. California Forward, remember California Forward? I think it's still around. I don't know how the hell it's still around, but what the hell is it reformed? Nothing has ever been reformed. I think the philanthropies have spent $300 trillion on it, to Richie's point, right? None of this stuff reformed anything because the institutions themselves aren't working. Media doesn't work. Certainly not the way we've known it. Government doesn't work the way we've known it. Academia certainly doesn't work. I hope there's no academics in the room. And my point, but my point is, all of these hierarchical institutions that we created in the pre-digital age don't work anymore because information flows worked from the top down, and that's why we structured them that way. In the digital age, information is moving sideways. And we have yet to figure out a way as human beings to find governing structures to help us all get along together. That's the challenge of this age. And my message here with this long diatribe, apologize for it, is government's not capable of doing that the way that we have known it. Ever. Ever. Since the tribal chieftain crawled out of this swamp with a big club and said, I'm in charge. And everyone's like, okay, point to the guy to the top, follow that guy. He's the strongest guy. It's not going to be that way anymore. And I can't tell you exactly what it's going to look like, but I can guarantee you in very short order it's going to look significantly, profoundly different.
You had, at the tail end of your question, you talked about labor.
Yeah.
So I got hired this year, I actually was hired last year, to focus on the congressional districts, of which you had 2 of them, that the Democrats needed to, quote, flip. Well, Porter's, it wasn't a flip. They wanted to hold Katie Porter's district. And my job was to try to figure out, because I told unions, your problem is you can't deliver your own members. Stop pretending that you're going to deliver the rest of us. You can't deliver your own members. I says, I'm a good Catholic boy, but I don't do what Pope Francis tells me to do in my bedroom. Sorry.
Does your mom know?
My mom does know. So I started off, and the first thing we did was I said to them, I don't want to talk to any activist, any active union members. The only people I'm interested in learning from are people who have never been to a union meeting, never walked a picket line, and maybe don't even know the actual correct name of their union. I only want to talk to the ordinary people. Then we knew how everybody is registered to vote. We were only talking to union members who are registered to vote, so we know what party you're in. And I said, I'm not sure that's good. And by the way, in the 6 congressional districts, Mike, the union member registration numbers mirror the statewide, right? 28% Republican, whatever. It's basically the same. But we asked a different question. With which party do you identify? What do you think union leaders felt like when I told them the answer to that question in those 6 congressional districts? 46% of union members who vote identified as Republican. Now, only 27% of them are registered as Republican. I said, therein is your problem. Well, what do? So we devised a campaign in which we broke all of the glass, all of the rules. 1, I said, we are never saying the word Democrat, and we are never saying the word Republican. To your point, Michael, when everything is not working anymore, you got to get radical and try really different stuff. So we're never saying either of those words. 2nd, we're never saying the word Trump or Biden and ultimately Harris. We're never saying their names. Because to do so would be to challenge people's self-identification. Right? When we ask people, how do you describe yourself as a union member? The answer that came back over and over and over was, we're hard workers. Oh, so you self-identify as a hard worker, which, by the way, as you know, Michael, the Latino population in California has so identified itself that way since Prop 187, remember? So, and then last thing, the most radical thing we did was we're never telling them how to vote. To your point, Mike. We have to just give people information that they can accept, and not the typical bullshit where you find the one bad vote and you make them out to be a murderer. No, none of that. Just, we're never telling them how to vote because they don't want to be told how to vote. And in 4 of those 6, we flipped 4 of those races in a year when we shouldn't have flipped any of them. Right. But I think there's some permanent lessons there because you were much more articulate in your description of the failure of the institution's ability to hold on and to have followers. I think that's profoundly correct. And at least this little bit of experience says, okay, we got to move in a radical different way if we're going to communicate with people.
Can I add on a little to that?
Yes.
First, I liked when he said profoundly correct, so I'm going to use that political capital.
You didn't, and you didn't interrupt. You didn't say you never I didn't interrupt you. You notice how you. So when he got a compliment, right?
Let him go. Let him go.
Let's build on
Let's give him more line. Give him more line.
what you said about,
Richie and I are actually working on a project together where we were doing some research, and what we found was we're looking at Latino voters after the election. And what we found was there is very, very little data. And by the way, this is consistent with the last couple of years of research, nationwide and in California, that there's very little data to suggest that Latino voters are becoming more conservative. Almost none. But there's overwhelming data showing Latinos becoming more populist and rejecting both parties. And the party in power, especially when they're not producing results for this constituency, which is driving that populism, is naturally going to suffer at the polls for that. That creates profound opportunities for both parties, very different opportunities for both parties, but it's a sign of those creaking institutions and the fact that the old way of doing things is no longer going to work.
So the word populism, we studied, growing up, we studied history, and we heard the word populism when we were in school. And when we talked about this, we talked about populism, and an image came into my mind of what I felt about populism when I learned about it as a child, and now how I feel about the word populism today and the brand of populism that we're seeing. Can you all talk about what does populism mean, just so we can have a common definition for all of us, and what brand of populism are we seeing now?
We have, if you think about, we have an absurd system. Democracy is kind of absurd. We have an election process. The side that gets one more vote gets 100% of the power. Mm-hmm. Wow. Yeah. That's just not logical on its face. And so whenever I talk to like law school classes, I get invited to speak or something, I'll always ask them, what is the essence of the Ford Motor Company? And I'll get a lot of answers, and they're always wrong. And I said, no. The essence of the Ford Motor Company is to sell cars, not to make them, sell them. That's the essence. When you have a system where the essence of politics is to be popular. Oh, they should do things because it's the right thing to do. No, that's not the essence of it. No, the essence of the democracy is to be popular, to be liked, to say things people say. I agree with that. I'm electing you. That's the essence of it. Winning is all that matters. Winning. And people, too many people, at least on the Democratic side, want to be right. They call themselves advocates. You know what advocate is? It's a polite word for loser. Yeah, it is. They're advocates. They love to lose. That's why. Because if they win, they'd have nothing to advocate for. But no, it's really true. I guess populism. I don't think we should think too much about it. I think we should just understand what Mike was saying. His definition of populism. Mike, correct me, but I think what you're saying is to be popular. To say and believe and promote things that the majority of people say that's good.
Yeah. I mean, that's definitely the gateway drug to what I'm gonna I think put a little bit more meat on the bones. I think populism in this moment is really anti-institutional because it's popular. Okay. And I want you to think about this. Some of the precincts that Donald Trump won that had working class, non-white voters in that kind of shocked the world are the exact same precincts where Bernie Sanders did very, very well. And there's this need, because we have all lived under a structure during almost all of our adult lives to look at this right-left spectrum, okay? Which is loosely defined, Republicans want less government, lower taxes, free markets, less regulation. We can agree on that, right? Democrats want a little bit more of an active governmental role, a little bit more oversight, some higher taxes to solve some of the social ills. That should be the role of government as we come together and agree on something. Fair enough? What I'm suggesting is there is no real right or left populism. There is an anti-institutional sentiment, which we call populism. And here's where it gets really toxic for us as Americans. We have partisanized anti-institutionalism. So if you're a Republican, you hate the academy, you hate higher ed, you hate the college system. They're all woke, right? You don't like the media, for sure. They're the enemy of the people. You don't like, give me another one. What else is there? Government. Well, we'll start with government. And notice, that's interesting. Notice I said the right doesn't like these other two things before government. That was what Republicanism was solely and exclusively about when I used to avoid Orange County at all costs as a young consultant. You don't even hear, you've never heard Donald Trump extol the virtues of smaller government, ever. There's never been that speech. Why? He doesn't believe in that. He's more than happy to use government to meet his needs. You don't believe me? Look what DeSantis did to Disney in Florida. Republicans are more than happy using the government to force their social view of the world. That was anathema to republicanism in the pre-Trump era. In fact, one of the great ironies of this time is that the Republican Party is a countercultural movement in the way that progressive liberalism was in the 1960s. And when you understand why, a lot of this stuff is going to make sense. The left that was radicalized in the 60s and 70s was attacking institutions. It was against the pillars of culture. It was countercultural. Well, guess what? Those boomers grew up. They were all protesting on college campuses.
Easy.
Richie didn't grow up.
And now all of those folks that had those values are in the leadership of our institutions. And as a result, the right is attacking those because they are a cultural threat. There's a cultural threat. And the left still will demonize and attack those entities on the right, the military, the church, right? These groups are institutions that aren't just bad, they're an existential threat to the future of American democracy on either side. They're not just benign, they're active threats trying to control your mind. That's where we've gotten. Populism is an attack on the leadership of those institutions broadly. When you listen to the language of Elizabeth Warren or Bernie Sanders attacking, if you say big, this is one thing I learned doing a Democratic campaign. Anything that's big, anything. Big plastic, big oil, big banks, big drugs, big. Anything that's big is like the boogeyman to Democrats. It's like there they are, it's big, it's bad, right? And Republicans, if you listen to Ted Cruz or Josh Hawley, as I know everybody does, they're using the exact same vernacular now. Big tech, big government, big whatever it is that they're opposed to, it's big, it's bad. Those are all marquee signs of an anti-institutionalist moment, when the lack of confidence and trust in our institutions no longer engender the trust. It's why we don't believe in science when there's a vaccine, because it's big pharma doing it. The vaccine threat was fascinating because you're watching these moms in yoga pants in Marin County organize with polyester pant-wearing dudes from Yolo County descending on the Capitol in Sacramento, and all the political professional classes going like, what the hell is happening? They're all anti-vaccine, and these people have hated each other forever. They didn't even go to each other's counties. Suddenly, they're lobbying together. That is a sign of collapsing institutions, and the coalitions that are driving that are changing entirely and completely. So populism, from my estimation, is, yes, absolutely popular, but it is more importantly anti-institutional.
Yeah. So I know we're getting close to a time where we're going to start asking some questions. I have one last question that they're going to ask questions.
Oh.
I have one, I want to try and end on a note that's, sort of looking forward, maybe optimistic. I'm optimistic. I have 3 kids between the ages of 27 and 33, and they're pretty great, actually. I mean, they're pretty great. I think they do have quite a bit of faith in institutions. My son's a doctor in the Army. My daughter's a 3rd grade teacher. I think these are people that respect institutions and have some faith in them. And they're the generation that's going to be taking over. So I'm interested to hear from the 2 of you. Am I right to feel pretty optimistic about what kind of leaders they're going to be?
I know, particularly looking like you guys, you're young, and here I'm aware that I'm not.
You know that.
And there have been oblique references made to the 60s. I get it. I've been target. I get it.
You're taking that
So I want to make sure I'm relevant. So I'm not going to go to the 60s. I'm going to make it more present tense. 1988.
Wow.
There was a band called Mike and the Mechanics. And their big hit had this lyric: every generation blames the one before. That has never, music changes, but sometimes there are timeless lyrics, recency and permanency. That's a timeless lyric because it has always been so and will be in the future. Those things don't change, in my view. So I'm not surprised. I love the fact that young people are usually the leaders of the rebellion. I think we need them to rebel. I think we need them to call bullshit on all of it, because I did it, and I think that those of us who did it back then made a contribution to the world, and I think that the younger people will make a more substantial contribution. They have more tools. I would only argue that you should beware of forwarding email. Don't forward email, because that is the fake work. In other words, you need to be a creator of thought, creating your own, not forwarding somebody else's thought. So use the access you have and the skills you naturally have with technology, but do so to create and to think differently, but never forward email. I'm looking right at you, miss.
Turn in here. No email forwarding this afternoon when you get back to the office. All right, Mike.
I'm just grateful he didn't say the lyrics to YMCA are timeless in the same way that I'm very optimistic very optimistic. And I think for those of you that do take the time, thank you in advance for reading the book. it is an optimistic book on this idea of pluralism and what that means. But let me say, Richie is saying something very, very important here, because regardless of what institution you are involved in, whether it's government or corporations or higher education or whatever it is, I want you to imagine for a moment if you had to describe everything you do as a mission or as an employee and hand it over to people under 30 years old or technologists who can develop an app or a technology solution and entrepreneurs, and say, I want you to solve the problems that I solve every day and my organization solves every day in a way that you create. None of them would come up with anything even remotely close to the way that you are doing the service delivery that you do. Not even close. And that doesn't mean there aren't nuances. Yeah, there's things that government shouldn't be doing. You're missing the point. The point is we are in a time, this digital age, most of the people in this room, not all of them, but most of those people in this room remember what I call the before times, before you got your first email address. If you remember a time before the internet, you are probably particularly ill-suited for transforming the institutions.
I'll take the hint.
I'm one of them. No, I'm there with you, right? No, but I'm not saying that there isn't a use or a value to us. In fact, I think we become more important because of this. This is the seeds of the optimism. We are in a moment where we're moving from the industrial age to the digital age. In fact, the industrial age is in the rearview mirror. Okay? The movement from the agricultural age to the industrial age was profound, and it shook humanity to its core. This is that by the factor of 10. But you needed all of those people to transfer the values that allow society to work in the first place. So those of us in this transitional generation who know the lyrics to Mike and the Mechanics and YMCA are particularly valuable at this moment in time, but that doesn't mean that we can create the institutions of the future. It means we can impart the values required of why we have institutions in the first place. And that's one of the things that's failing us right now. It's why we've allowed the coarseness of our dialogue and our discourse. It's why we accept the very low bar only to realize, oh, we can go lower. Let's go lower, right? And get broader in that support. That's the importance of people who remember the before times. I believe that to my core. That's the first in terms of where we're heading as in this new age. But the demographic transformation that we're going through, if you polled Americans, and this excludes everybody except for one person in the audience, who's 60 years of age or older, this age cohort has the most negative view of America of any generation ever polled in the history of Gallup, despite being the most privileged, wealthy, abundant generation that has led their life in relative peace and security with the U.S. as a global hegemon. They're like, America's done. We've had it. It's not going to last. The next generation is going to have it worse, so might as well tear the candelabras down and grab it while Rome is being sacked. But if you poll younger, poorer, browner people who have less reasons to believe in the idea of America, the numbers are much, much, much higher. In all of our institutions broadly, with two exceptions I'll get to in a second, but in the idea of America itself. And the idea of America is essentially this. I believe that if I work hard, show up, do my 40 hours, play by the rules, my kids' lives will be better than mine. That's basically the contract we make, and it's why we need, first of all, we need a lot more immigration, because immigrants believe this mythology far more than anybody else. It's why they're willing to come. That we need that to actually hold together as a union. And when the wealthiest, oldest, most landed, privileged amongst us don't believe in that anymore, the only way you can save this country and this republic, if you believe it's going to be challenged, as I do in the next few years, is through cultural change. As my good friend George Conway says, there is no constitution or set of rules that can be passed in the House and the Senate that will protect itself from a people that don't want it anymore. You can't do that. You can't electoral college your way reform out of that. You can't Citizens United your way out of that. You can't dark money your way out of that, or whatever thing everyone thinks is going to be the silver bullet. The only thing that can make this experiment work going forward is a belief culturally in it. The idea that tomorrow is going to be better, and we're not hearing that a lot in Washington right now. We're hearing the exact opposite. And I'll close on this after the long diatribe. It is the only way we can get that back is in one of two ways. The first is literal demographic transformation, which is happening, and the second is we have to be tested in conflict. We have to actually fight for who we want to be. It is what virtually every generation of Americans has had to do, except for ours, and it's why it's falling apart. If you don't fight for it and struggle for it and suffer for it, you don't value it. And when you don't value it, you're willing to give it away for nothing, which is essentially what we're doing. So both of those things, both of those required dynamics are happening right now. And that's ultimately why I'm not saying it's going to be easy. Yeah. I'm not saying it's going to be fun. I was going to make a joke, but we'll set that aside. But it's required. It is absolutely required of us, and I believe to my core we are still worthy of the moment.
So, do we have time for a question or two? We do. Do we have people who would like to ask questions? Because I have more I can ask. Okay, we've got one over here. Awesome. Please, thank you for doing that.
Thank you. Yes, two-part question. First question, the need for Democrats to win, otherwise they will not have an opportunity to maybe correct course and do it again. Was that overstated or exaggerated? That's the first question. Basically saying if they don't win, we're going to lose our democracy. The second question is, I understand the course correction that is needed by the Democrats, and by the way, I agree with you 100%, but could it have been as simple as we had a president that waited till the 11th hour to withdraw from the race, and the thing that we call the United States is just not ready for a woman president, let alone a mixed-race woman?
His lack of popularity predated the horrible debate episode by 2 years. Bidenomics, I mean, you go back and look at it. When did he market the word trillion? Year one. When did he then succeed with trillion? Year two. At that point, the price of bacon was $9. People knew trillion. That means a lot. Oh, my rent is higher. Ergo, that word has something to do with my rent. Now, you can say, well, that's not actually it. No, that's the way people felt. And missing that and disrespecting that by telling people, oh, you should just ignore your lived experience. You should ignore that because here's the macro. We're really better off and blah, blah, and here's another number. That's the kind of elitist, unconscious elitism that created the problem. So no, I disagree. I think the root of his lack of popularity predated the debate, had nothing to do with any of that, and that was the seeds of the end. That's what I believe.
So there was another part to that question too, which is, you were asking, we had to win because we're never going to have a chance to win again.
Yeah, but we're always going to win again. I mean, here's one thing we know. The world's greatest quarterbacks throw interceptions. All Trump did was catch the interceptions we threw. Guess what? Now you got the ball, Tiger. What do you think he's going to do? He's going to throw interceptions. So that's why we go back, and that's in our political DNA. I am old enough to have lived through the end of the world several times. But we do live in a period where we have elevated exaggeration. Yeah. Every warm day is the hottest on record. Every flood's the biggest that ever happened. Every fire, we have so many crises We have housing crisis, homeless crisis, democracy. Why do we keep exaggerating? Because it makes the politicians important. They're the ones who spread the exaggeration, and then the pundits do, and then the media does, because then you're all important. The bigger the crisis, the more crises we have, the more important we are. And we get to slay dragons, and then we're going to be the goat. That's what's going on. And so we live in this era of exaggeration and distorted language. I mean, think about it. When I was a kid, you know what a gig was? Is a couple of guys playing guitars in their garage and then looking for a gig. What is it now? It's a shitty job with no Social Security. We call it a gig. Get off, go to the airport. What do you see? Ride sharing. Ride sharing? As though it's like, that's like a perverse use of the word sharing. Or how about you're going to see the next one is an oldie, guest worker. That's what we label indentured servitude. It's now called guest worker. Yeah. Think about it. That's what's wrong. We live in an era where we're loose with our tongue. We exaggerate the shit out of everything because it elevates our own self-image. We make every crisis bigger than it really is. Look at the thing. Did you read today's paper about the surge in Americans who are responding favorably to that crazy kid who shot the fella? CEO. It's a surge. It's unbelievable. And there's 3 columnists for the New York Times today talk about how unbelievable and how how much money? But I read the columns. There's no number. Nobody says, well, how many people have said that? Mm-hmm. Oh, it's a surge. Oh, unprecedented. Oh, no. They're out raising, and people are contributing money. Mm-hmm. $31,000 in the whole world. It's nothing. But everyone's now, that's the new, it's all overstatement. Overstatement is going to kill us, said the overstater.
So we touched a nerve. Would anyone else like to touch a nerve today? Yes, ma'am.
Oh, okay. So I have a selfish question, because I may or may not be an elected official. Y'all talked about them real bad.
Depending on the answer.
But my question is, what are your thoughts on an elected that really does just want to do work, doesn't care about being popular, doesn't care about what the triggers and the buzzes are, but sincerely wants to make an impact in their community, where they live, where they work, where they play, without aspirations of going any higher? I'm talking local, they don't make it down to my spots to vote for me. Local elected official. What are your thoughts on that? Like, should I get out and consult?
No, look, my real passion in politics is local government. I've known a lot of the city council members, city managers, people who actually are doing stuff for a living. I mean, I've done presidential race stuff and governors and senators and Congress. And yeah, the higher you go, it's like a professional athlete. The more neurotic and crazy and wild it becomes. Yeah. And when you start to deal with people, I worked with the League of California Cities for 15 years. You're not alone. That's most elected officials. And for a long time, when I took them on as a client, I couldn't figure out what the motivations behind these people were. Like, oh, you're telling me all you really want is a safe park for your kids? Come on, what the hell's going on here? And in fact, that's all they really wanted to do, was have a safe park for their kids. I need you to tie that sentiment to kind of the question earlier with the hyperbole. We are in a hyperbolic age, there's no question about it. But the vast majority of people don't believe we're on the cusp of the end of losing our country. Most politicians don't want to be president of the United States. Most politicians just want to fix some stuff. Most voters just are like, the price of eggs is too damn high. And these guys ain't going to fix it. I'll try the other guy again. Things are not that bad, all things considered. can debate that, but it's not more profound in saying it's misogyny and systemic racism. I'm not saying those things don't exist. They do. They do. But do I believe that that's what attributed to a broad shift of why Latinos are now suddenly, sexist and ageist? And I can show you facts. One of the best performing politicians amongst Latino men in this country was Kamala Harris, who got elected many times statewide. She beat Loretta Sanchez in her own Hispanic districts, in her own congressional district. But suddenly now, because you don't agree with me, you're racist, you're sexist, you're not ready for this kind of a change. No, I'm ready for the change. I'm very aware of what the choices are ahead of me, and it's not that people aren't ready for that change. The real self-reflection needs to be why Democrats are losing to Donald Trump. That's the self-reflection that never takes place. Ask yourself that question and fix that, because that ain't that hard to beat, by the way. I beat him. I was with the Lincoln Project. We beat him. Wasn't that hard? Wasn't that easy, but wasn't that hard.
One last question.
And
you go.
on your point,
You go.
I've never believed and continue to, I do not believe there's any such thing as quote unquote higher office.
Fair. Kate or Chris? Let's see, I saw your hand. I saw Kate's hand first. Sorry, Chris.
Would either of you care to predict what election will happen in California that a Republican or an independent could be elected governor? Or will it take someone way outside, like an Arnold Schwarzenegger, to break through? I mean, it's great listening to both of you. It actually makes me hopeful, but okay, so when are the institutions going to fall in California that will get a little change?
That means I'll take this first. That's side. I think I'm seasoned enough now as a political consultant to realize it doesn't matter. And the reason why is because I believe the Democratic Party is about to change far more significantly than the Republican Party is. So if you had asked me which candidate was going to be taking, let me put it this way, just to give you a sense. And again, the danger is in looking through a partisan lens and asking that question. I don't mean to be dismissive, but understand this. Kamala Harris ran on the Lankford bill, a conservative Republican position on border security that was more conservative, not moderate, not bipartisan, the most conservative border security bill in the history of her party. The Democrats are currently fracking and drilling more than at any point in the history of this country, of either presidency. We have a more muscular foreign policy than we have had since probably Ronald Reagan, more anti-Russian than probably anybody since Reagan, including the expansion of NATO. The centerpiece of her economic opportunity zone was, get this, tax cuts for corporations to incentivize giving ownership to the employees of those companies. That is Jack Kemp policy from Ronald Reagan, Reaganomics. And if you think it's just particularly pronounced with the Democratic Party, let's look at the Republicans. Donald Trump just got nominated in the Republican Party, running on the largest tax increase in the history of America. And he's isolationist, anti-free trade, okay? Protectionist. Let's pull away from this muscular policy of American intervention. That candidate was whooped in 1984 because it was Walter Mondale running against Ronald Reagan. So when you ask me, well, can the Republicans come back? I don't know and I don't care because it doesn't matter. What matters is the policy issue sets that we're actually going to be addressing. And this is that moment when the coalitions in both parties are in the most flux, where we're going to see a redefinition of what the parties stand for. When Richie's data is saying 46% of union members are Republicans, something's about to change very significantly, right? So the old way that we've thought about politics really doesn't apply anymore. Again, I don't mean to be dismissive. I know why you're asking. The question is, are things going to change is the right question. My very firm belief is, yes, they are. And whether the Republicans or Democrats are in control, I think we're going to see a more growth, aspirational middle-class agenda replace what we've been dealing with for the past 30 years.
No, There's nothing to add to that. I agree. I do agree.
All right, can we have a big OC Forum thank you to this awesome panel? Mike Madrid, Jena Jensen, and Richie Ross. All right, just a couple of things, and then we'll let you get out of here. First off, on your way out, please thank the Hyatt folks for all the great stuff that they provided today. Want to also thank our friends at ComLab who put this together. Janice, would you come up for a minute? You know, the great philosopher Iron Man once said, every journey has an end. And for me, today is the end of a 2-year journey as the board president of Orange County Forum. I am incredibly fortunate to have worked with some great board members. Come on up. And we've had 24 months of great programs. So appreciate all the attendance you all have. But the best part of all is now I am literally handing the baton over to Janice Bachman, who is, here we go, the incoming board president. We look forward to a wonderful 2025. We got some great programs already on the docket for the first 3 months of the year, and it's going to be awesome to see this organization just take off under your leadership. You're welcome. All right, you all have a wonderful and blessed holiday and Christmas season. Thank you for being with us. Drive safe on the way home. Take care.